For this deep dive, you've brought us, well, a really fascinating document to say the least. It's like part personal reflection, part geopolitical commentary, all kind of mashed together. We've got the Russia-Ukraine conflict as this backdrop, but then layered on top are the author's own, struggles with faith, what they believe, and what it means to have beliefs that most people don't agree with.
Yeah, and it's that personal element that really grabs you right off the bat.
Yeah.
You can tell this isn't just some intellectual exercise for them. It's like their whole worldview, their identity even, is tied into their stance on the war. It adds this whole other layer when you're trying to unpack their arguments.
Definitely. I mean, right from the beginning, they're clearly grappling with this conflict. They
Yeah.
were sympathetic to Ukraine initially, obviously didn't want a war, but then they end up supporting Russia's actions. That's got to be a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, no kidding. They lay out their reasoning pretty clearly, though. Like they point to all these things the West did, sanctioning the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, supporting Ukraine, basically ignoring Russia's security concerns. They're suggesting that this whole situation, this war, was practically inevitable because of it.
Interesting. But even though they're sure about all that, they admit to not really knowing how the war will actually end up benefiting Russia. You
Yeah.
know, they even mention some, personal downsides, like video games getting delayed. It's this weird mix of these huge global events and then, like, their own little corner of the world.
It really is. And it makes you think about, well, how those massive things, geopolitical events, trickle down and mess with people's lives in ways they wouldn't even think about.
Uh-huh.
But it also shows just how much they believe what they're saying, right?
Right.
Even with all the uncertainty and even with those personal, I guess you could say, sacrifices, they're sticking with Russia.
And that's where it gets really interesting because it's more than just, oh, I support Russia because of this or that geopolitical reason. There's this other side, this whole thing about their beliefs and how different they are from what they call like the normative views in society. They almost sound like they feel like an outsider.
Oh, totally. Like they talk about how hard it is to hold on to beliefs that are, as they put it, utterly outside the norm.
Yeah.
How isolating it is to feel like you're constantly going against the grain. They even question if they're actually searching for the truth or if they just like to disagree. That really got me. It's like they're holding up a mirror to themselves asking, am I on this side because it's right or because it's different? You don't see that kind of self-reflection every day.
No, you don't. It's almost like they're already expecting to be labeled, as difficult or a lost cause because their beliefs are so outside the mainstream. And it really makes you wonder, how do you deal with that tension between what you believe as an individual and what society says is okay, especially when those norms are always changing? And it's not just, a general feeling of not fitting in. They get specific. They say if Canada, their home country, went to war with Russia, they couldn't side with Canada, like, at all. They even say they would, get this, welcome a Russian invasion. That's kind of a big deal, right?
It is. It shows you how deep their conviction runs. It's like they're
Yeah.
saying their loyalty to what they see as true goes beyond borders, their own country included.
Wow. That makes me wonder what would make someone feel that strongly, to go against their own country even. Where does Russia even fit into this whole thing?
Well, that's where their idea of truth comes in, with a capital T. They seem to be saying their support for Russia, even with all its issues, comes from this deeper commitment to what they believe is truly, objectively true.
So it's less about the geopolitics and more about being on what they see as the right side historically, even if most people disagree.
You got it. And to get them, you have to look at how they frame this whole West versus Russia thing. They're super critical of the West. They even call America the empire of lies, which is, wow. They see all this stuff they're against coming from the West, like transgender rights, gay marriage, and they say the West has totally abandoned what they call authentic Christianity.
Sounds like they're saying, at least from their point of view, that the West is losing its morals or something like that. It's a pretty harsh take.
It is, and they connect it directly to why they support Russia. They see Russia, even with its problems, as being closer to their version of truth than us, basically.
This whole truth idea is clearly a big deal to them, but they never really, define it. What do they mean by that, you think? Are we talking about religion here?
Oh, yeah.
Philosophy?
They do get specific. They say truth is basically the same as Christ, and that by learning about Christ, they've come to align with, get this, orthodoxy, autocracy, and nationality. They even shorten it to God, King, and Nation.
Okay, so there's definitely this religious aspect to their thinking, and it's almost like they're ranking their loyalties with this truth as the top priority, above everything else, even their country.
Exactly. And to make that point, they use this example of Orthodox Christians in Japan during, I think it was the Russo-Japanese War. These folks were stuck between their country and their faith. It's like the author sees themselves in that same dilemma, ultimately choosing what they see as truth, even if it means going against, well, everything else.
It's a tough thing to wrap your head around, choosing your beliefs when they clash with everything, you know? Societal norms, national identity, even your own sense of belonging. They're obviously feeling pretty alienated from like mainstream Western society. It makes you wonder, is that feeling becoming more common now with everything so connected?
It's a good question. Because, yeah, on the one hand, the internet lets everyone have a voice, right? Makes it easier to find your people, even if your views are, let's say, a little out there. But then again,
Yeah, it cuts both ways, doesn't it? Finding your people, but also maybe feeling even more out of sync with the rest of the world.
right. And I think it's important to remember this whole thing isn't just about, like, geopolitics or even faith, you know? It's about being brave enough to really think about the tough questions, even when the answers make you uncomfortable or challenge what you thought you knew.
I think that's what's so interesting about this deep dive. We're getting this glimpse into how someone who's really wrestling with these big, complex ideas sees the world, and they're doing it in a way that's surprisingly honest. Remember how they wondered if they just liked being the contrarian, if that was part of it? Oh, absolutely. That kind of self-awareness, that willingness to question your own biases, that's huge. Especially now when we're just bombarded with information, different sides, different narratives all the time. It's easy to just get swept up in one way of seeing things. But this document, it's like it's reminding us to take a step back and ask, why do I believe this anyway? It's almost like they're giving us permission to do the same, you know? To really look at our own beliefs, the things we're so sure about, and be open to the fact that we might be wrong.
And to accept that there might not be just one truth, or at least not just one way of understanding things.
It's a humbling thought, that's for sure. But man, it feels important now more than ever. I mean, look at everything going on. Wars, conflicts, people so divided. This ability to understand where other people are coming from, even when you disagree completely, it just feels more important than ever.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So yeah, maybe next time you have a really strong opinion about something or you find yourself drawn to the opposite of what everyone else thinks, try thinking about this author. Ask yourself, what's shaping my view on this? Am I open to seeing it another way?
Definitely something to think about. Well, this deep dive certainly took us down some unexpected paths. I've got to say, it's left me thinking a lot about the nature of truth, how powerful beliefs can be, and how crucial it is to grapple with tough questions, even when the answers are far from easy.